Alright, hello everybody. I'm Asbjorn Torvol, and this week Frater Xavier is recovering from some recent surgery, so I'm going to be filling in for today's video. So without any further ado, let's just jump straight into it. So today I want to talk about one of the most important concepts to me in my magical practice, and that is the human variable. This concept single-handedly is responsible for how every single ritual I do is constructed, how every spell is created, and the results that those rituals and spells manifest. One of the great blessings and curses of magic is that every concept is multifaceted. And so in order to truly relay an idea and truly outline a concept, you have to look at several different things beforehand. Look at its prerequisites, and that's exactly what we're going to do with this concept. And that prerequisite is in understanding the relationship between the objective and the subjective. And the reasons for this, to me, are quite obvious, to others aren't. Additionally, a prerequisite to this entire concept is depolarization, which many of you should have gotten down pretty well already. Now, the objective and the subjective are not easy concepts to pin down, and that's because everybody has a different opinion on how much of magic is objective and how much of it is subjective. Most, at least most that I have seen, tend to lean more towards subjective, and this is present in both left-hand path communities and right-hand path communities, where magic is so subjective that you more or less make it up as you go along. It's a free-for-all. You can believe anything you want. You can believe in flying pigs because it's classed as personal knowledge, personal gnosis. And so what I have found with things being overly subjective is that nobody can be wrong, and so everyone can believe whatever they want without consequence. And the problem with that is that it can be very self-destructive. There are people who believe so strongly in their magic crystals that they've stopped taking their medication and ended up suffering a lot for it. Now the underlying problem with things being so subjective is that people become gullible. They end up not practicing magic, but essentially validating their own fantasies. It's like an online RPG, where it's a game and everyone can be a wizard, everyone can be Gandalf. And that is one of the biggest problems you'll see in the occult community, is everybody wants to be Obi-Wan Kenobi, everybody wants to be Gandalf the Grey. Nobody wants to be themselves. And so you find that a lot of magicians are actually just escapists. They're looking to escape their reality by jumping into this magical fantasy. And then you have the other side of that, which is the objective, which is people who are so objective that they have no level of subjectivity whatsoever. And what happens here is that they become like stone. They're close-minded, they're never open to new ideas. They follow this strict set of principles without even really questioning or testing them once they have got them down. Everything is universal. These are universal mechanics that work for everyone, and that's it. And so they are so objective that they stop testing information. They stop looking at new evidence, new information, and they lose the art of debate. Now, these people are few and far between. I've found very little of these people in the community, but they do exist in both the left-hand path and the right-hand path communities. Now, depolarization brings you into the middle. So I like to use the clay analogy. So you have the subjective, which is clay that's got too much water to actual substance. And so it ends up water. You can't really form it into anything. It's just loose and goes everywhere. And then you have the objective, which is like stone, where they're just so hardened that they're never going to change. They're going to stagnate. They're going to stay in the state that they are, and that's it. And then you have the depolarized, which are like clay, and you can mold them into whatever you desire. You can create whichever sculpture you desire out of that material. And that is what we aim to be. That is what depolarization all is about, is not being so subjective that you're just gullible and, in all honesty, a waste. But not so objective that you're like hardened stone that stagnates. You're looking for a balance. And this is one of the reasons why I love Frater Xavier's work so much, is because depolarization is important for all aspects of magic. It's actually something that I would consider to be an objective truth. Now, let's go into a bit more detail, because it's not just about the people involved. It's actually about the line between the objective and the subjective itself. What is objective and what is subjective? How does a magician tell the difference between something in magic that is an objective truth and something which is subjective? Well, that's not an easy thing to answer, because there are so many different portions of information, pools of information, to give you an answer to that. This is why doing your own research is important. However, I like to give a simplified answer which will at least point you in the right direction. I see magic itself, magic as a universal operating system, if you will, that has a set of principles that are universal regardless of how you put it. And this is backed up, in my case, by science. So let's look at the law of mentalism. That would be an objective truth. You cannot do something without first thinking about it. Now, this doesn't just apply to us as humans. This actually applies even down to celled organisms, to microorganisms like cells in our body. They have some form of mental capacity, regardless of how sophisticated it is, and it has a thought which allows it to do something. Now, even if their thought is subconscious, it's still a thought. And so every action is a result of the mind. The all is mind. The universe itself is mental. That is an objective truth. And so Hermeticism is a great place to start. I would say that all of the Hermetic principles, at least at their core, are objective. To put it simply, I see magic as objective, but only the mechanics of how it works. So magic is, for a lack of a better description, like a machine. It needs certain components in order for it to work, and those components are things that we learn and we implement into our magic. So the all is mind, depolarization, law of correspondence, all of those things are parts, or, cogs of the machine that allow it to work. Once you implement all these into magic effectively, you start getting better results. So what is subjective? What in magic is subjective? I would say that the traditions are subjective. Why is it that two completely different traditions can still get results? Why is it that a Western ceremonial magician, like Frater Xavier, can get great results walking that tradition? And then you have someone like Uncle Birch, who's a witch, practices various different ATRs, can also get great results. Well, the reason for this is because the traditions and the way that we choose to work with the machine of magic differs. But the subjective is the traditions. It's the things that we put on top of the machine. So the tradition you walk is subjective. It works different for everybody. And the tradition that works for you may be completely different. Some people might work very well as a ceremonial magician, and some people might work better as a chaos magician. The components we use in our rituals. Why is it that two people can create the same ritual with exactly the same components and get two different results? Well, this is because those aspects are subjective. And so you have to understand how your subjectivity allows you to get results. This is why the concept of knowing thyself is so important. It's not just about understanding who you are. It's about understanding your own subconscious mind, understanding the language that it speaks. And when you've understood those things, you can implement those into your rituals. Things like color psychology. In some rituals, it will say that you have to have, say, a red candle. But why? Ask yourself that question. Why? Because why is the most important question when learning this subjective. Why? Because two people can have a completely different association to the color red. Some people might see it as maybe an angry color, whereas some people might associate it to love. And so there is no real answer to those things. Those things are based on association, the subjective, which exists in your subconscious mind, which Frater Xavier has mentioned a few times on this channel. Now, on that last little bit, we touched on the fact that two different people can have a completely different association to the same thing. This is the human variable. The human variable embodies the concept that two people can have a very different reaction to the same stimuli. And everything is a stimuli. Every single thing in your life is a symbol, is a stimulus. The rituals you use in a component, including yourself. The human variable is the concept that you are a component of your own magic. And everything that happens within you affects that magic. The mood that you're in, the current emotions that you're feeling, the state that you're in, physically, mentally, spiritually. The thoughts that are processing through your head in that current moment are part of the human variable. But also the human variable is constantly changing, because we change every day. Not just biologically, but mentally and spiritually. The mood that we're in fluctuates. And so that is a component of our rituals. So when you start taking into consideration the subjective with your magic, and you tailor your rituals to your own subconscious needs, and your associations of those stimuli, including yourself, you'll start to see better results. Because the human variable is the most important part of magic. Because it encompasses the one thing in magic that's probably more important than anything else, the law of mentalism. All magic starts with the mind, and your mind is a component of those rituals. And so if you can't tailor the ritual to work with your mind, then you're going to receive worse results. The best way to get efficient results and better results is to be able to tailor the ritual to your mind, or vice versa. To be able to take the human variable, which is yourself, and implement that efficiently into a ritual. This is the reason why a lot of people don't get the results that they want. It's because they're trying to perform a ritual with components that don't work with their subconscious mind. It's a bit like trying to stop smoking. People are resisting something which is subconsciously ingrained. Now, as Frater Xavier said in a previous video, it's easier to work with what you've got than it is to spend a lifetime trying to change it. Bear in mind I'm paraphrasing. Now, to give you guys something to go away with, looking at the subjective in your daily life and your magic is going to help you greatly understand the environment you're working in. Being able to understand the components of your ritual, and by understand I mean understand. It's easy to read a book and have the book tell you, well, you need to implement blueberries into a ritual, but without understanding why, we miss core information. Only when we understand why something is the way it is can we truly have some influence over it. Not just influence, but understand how to best use that to our advantage. And that includes our own mind. When you understand the relationship between the objective and the subjective in your magic, you will learn how to approach your magic more efficiently and get better results. Now, I'm a firm believer that unless you're getting results, you need to keep refining your magic. Results is a good way to measure how well your magic's doing. If you're not seeing tangible results, if you're not seeing results from your work, then there's something that you're not doing that you maybe need to look into. And often you'll find that it's subjective. You're trying to include components which don't fit with your mind, which don't work with your current subconscious state. Or you're not implementing the objective truths enough that actually allow the subjective to fuel the machine of magic. This concept is one of the most important in my practice because it outlines everything I do. Not just in the circle, but the magic I do outside the circle, the things that I think on a daily basis. Being aware of circumstance and allowing myself to deal with circumstance in the best way possible to achieve the best outcome. Now, just to clear up one thing before I finish this video, this is not to say that following by the book is necessarily a bad thing. Every book, in my view, is somewhat of a template. There's objective truths in those books in which the rituals are performed. The structures are typically built upon objective truths, especially if you're reading things in ceremonial magic, usually the method of actually approaching the ritual, is objective. But the actual components used in those rituals, the candles, the incense, the different flavors, things like that, is subjective. And you are to tailor those aspects to your own practice. And so I see books more as a template than I do a set in stone rule for every single component. Look at the mechanics, ask yourself, are these objective? And look at a logical reason as to why they're objective. And then look at the components and see how you can best tweak those rituals to suit your own mind. You are a component, and so you have to understand your own relationship to the stimuli that you're trying to work with. And that's where I'm going to leave this video. I know this is probably a lot to take in. This is probably one of my more in-depth concepts, and trying to cover this in such a short video is very difficult. But I hope that you took something away with this, and I hope that it gave you something to start implementing into your own practice. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and until next time, stay true and stay awesome.